Here's a question for you. Have you ever looked at a standard Vauxhall Viva and thought, if only it was a bit higher and looked more like an SUV? You have? Well, you're in luck. Say hello to the brand new Vauxhall Viva Rocks. So like the standard Viva, there's a choice of just one engine. It's a 1 litre naturally aspirated petrol, which offers, wait for it, 74 brake horsepower. Oh, I know, lots of power. And it has 95 Newton meters of torque. It's mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is okay to use. Changes are precise enough, and it should be absolutely fine for most buyers. Now, one of the main differences between the standard Viva and the Viva Rocks, other than the price of course, which I will get onto in a little bit, is for looks. Now, this has an increased ride height of 18 millimeters, and you will also notice the SUV styling. So you've got the rugged plastic cladding to the outside to make it look, well, a bit more like an SUV, and it does. Now, it's worth noting at this point that you don't get 4-wheel drive. So for those of you thinking, oh, it's a proper 4x4, it's not. But let's face it, a lot of people won't need that 4-wheel drive capability when you're just popping to the shops. So the Viva Rocks is based on the standard car in its SE specification. That means that, well, in all honesty, you don't get a great level of kit, but it's all about value for money. Speaking of which, how much does it cost? Prices start from £11,815, and for that you'll get standard features such as Bluetooth, front electric windows, air conditioning, 15-inch alloys, cruise control and 6 airbags. That's really your lot. Now, this is all about offering cheap motoring, and the Viva does that. This car, however, has had a few boxes ticked on the options list, which consist of heated front seats and steering wheel, 7-inch touchscreen with navigation, Vauxhall Onstar system, rear parking sensors, spare wheel and the sparkling blue metallic paint, meaning that this model is priced above £14,000. Let's be honest, it's kind of the same price as what you'd pay for a top of the range Suzuki Ignis. And I've tested the Ignis and it's quite a good car. And I think it's a better looking car as well, if you sort of excuse the rear end, because the rear end isn't the Ignis's, it's not its strongest point, is it? It's not going to win Rear of the Year anytime soon. But the Viva Rocks isn't exactly a minger, but it's not quite as funky looking as the Ignis. But the Viva Rocks may be a cheap alternative to a proper SUV, but you could have a look at the Dacia Sandero stepway. And if I'm going to be honest, the Viva Rocks in its cheapest, a bit of a bump there, the Viva Rocks in its cheapest specification is still more expensive than the top of a range Dacia Sandero stepway. And with the Dacia, you do get a lot of features as standard, such as navigation, whereas this you have to pay extra for it, and you get front and rear parking sensors and so forth. And the Sandero offers more space as well. So the Sandero can offer a boot of 320 litres, which can then be increased to 1,200 litres, whereas in the Viva Rocks you have a standard boot size of 206 litres, but if you fold down the rear seats you can increase it to just above 1,000 litres. So if space is what you're after, and a lower cost for that matter, then you might be better off looking at the Dacia. Now, I know the Sandero is a super mini, whereas the Viva is a city car, so they're not really in the same class. However, both cars have the same aim of offering a brand new car that won't cripple your wallet. But one advantage that the Vauxhall has is badge appeal, whereas the Dacia doesn't have that as much. But how does the car drive? Well, as you can imagine, with a 1 litre engine that isn't turbocharged, it hasn't got a lot of performance, but once you get it going, it's okay. So down this windy road, I do feel like I'm having to wring its neck out somewhat. And yeah, so in regards to a 0 to 62 time, that comes eventually. It's just over 13 seconds, which is pretty pedestrian to say the least. Actually, it's very pedestrian, and the top speed is 106 miles per hour. But let's face it, a lot of buyers won't be buying this car for speed or performance. They'll be buying it because it's easy to park, it's frugal, I will get onto the economy in a little bit, and it's value for money. And this is a bare bones car. It's It's made to be convenient. It's a little run around from A to B, and it's not made to be flash. So to judge it on that aspect would be quite unfair. The inside, again, it's full of hard, cheap plastics, but again, it's a cheap car, so that's to be expected. But in regards to how the car drives, it's actually not bad. It's not thrilling. Would I go so far to call it fun? Not too sure. I've only got this car for a short time, but so far it hasn't really conjured up any real feelings of fun. Certainly not the same amount that the Suzuki Ignis did. So the underpinnings are exactly the same as the standard Viva city car, and the ride is pretty good. It's a little bit firm, but it soaks up the bumps quite nicely, if I'm going to be honest. To drive, it's not offensive. The handling is pretty decent. The steering's actually got quite a nice weight to it, but if you want to make it lighter, then you've got a button here that's marked City, and then the steering goes nice and light. In fact, I had something very similar in a Fiat Punto I used to own, but I quite like my steering to be heavier, so let's turn it off like so. And in fairness, through the bends, it's not actually that bad. It hasn't got massive amounts of grip. Oh, a little bit of understeer there. So is this car as fun to drive as a Suzuki Ignis? In my opinion, no, it's not. But it's not a bad car nonetheless. Right, let's test out this mighty engine, shall we? Is it Christmas yet? There we go, to 50 miles per hour, as that is the speed limit down here. And that seemed to take quite some time. In fact, I think I may have been clean shaven when I started, but never mind. But like I say, this car isn't made for performance. Visibility out the car is pretty good. I've got no dramas there. It's a small car, so it's going to be easy to park, but you can have the optional rear parking sensors if needed, and this is what this car has been fitted with. But I'm sure for most of you it should be absolutely fine to park it in your local supermarket with little problems. Now, because it's a small car, it does mean that the space in the back is, what's a polite way of saying this? Limited. So for a tall chap like me, I'm cramped in the back for certain, especially if I were to sit behind a driver of the same height as me. So really, in the back, it's best for children or smaller adults. If you're of a taller stature, then you might want to shotgun for a front passenger seat. Just a little bit of advice for you there. So one of the advantages of having a small engine is that it's frugal. So in regards to economy, on a combined run, you're looking at 60.1 miles to the gallon. And in regards to CO2 emissions, you're looking at 106 grams per kilometre. So like I say, if you want a cheap run around that won't cost an arm and a leg to run or to insure, then have a look at the Viva Rocks, especially if you want a car that has more of an SUV styling. And of course, it's got a higher ride height as well to make it a bit more versatile, but don't expect to be going up any any off-road trails anytime soon, because I don't think this car would quite be able to handle it. Now, I will be honest, I can kind of see why Vauxhall has made this model to look more like an SUV, because I know SUVs are very much in fashion at the moment. However, there is a slight problem here. You could save yourself some more money and buy a standard Viva, which will offer more kit for less money, which seems like a bit of a no-brainer if you ask me. So what we have here is a car that looks like an SUV but can't go off-road, costs more money and has less kit. Therefore, I'll be honest, it's a bit tricky to really recommend for Viva Rocks. On that note, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and please subscribe for more car obsession.